Joe, what are you talking about? Stetson Bennett had to go against Ohio State and score literally 20-plus unanswered points to beat Ohio State. And you're going to say, oh, he's just not a good quarterback. And you're going to
say – No. Wait, I'm not saying that he's not a good quarterback. The argument that I have made constantly, Blake, and the argument that we're continuing here is that he's not an all-time great. That's what I can't, and I refuse to use the word elite for the guy. And that is I will die on.
Okay. Well, first off, you're wrong. And we are live. Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. I am one of your co-hosts, Blake Ruffino. Once upon a time, used to be the best long snapper in Rhode Island history. Not anymore.
Not anymore.
I'm just joking. Okay. But we were debating the Stetson Bennett thing.
Again.
What do I know? I'm gonna before, because we got a lot we got to get to. Winning 2 national titles in the SEC in today's day and age is elite.
It's great. It's top. It's top tier.
No, it is not great. Stop with the word great. It is elite.
When Jake Coker won a national championship at Alabama, we don't talk about him.
You are able to win back-to-back national titles, you become elite. Then make the argument for Saban. Make the argument. Make the argument about for Saban. He's won 1 back-to-back national title once, which then propelled him into greatness. Now, what happens? Let me ask you this question.
Okay.
What happens in a weak schedule of Georgia if they can't win a national title again without the mailman? He delivered them out of the ashes of Hades because Zeus had struck them dead, and they hadn't won a natty since the 1980s, and he came back out there, dropped his big drunk balls, knocking on heaven's door, puns intended, and went out there and won 2 national titles.
This is why then I'm going to be rooting for Carson Beck to go in and win a national championship again, because then that is going to completely prove my argument is that if you take all the accolades, all the performances, and we just look at a sheet of paper of Stetson Bennett, that's all we look at is a sheet of paper. Give the guy as many awards, put him in as many top tier categories as you want. If we don't know how big he is in his background, if we pretend he's a 5-star recruit who is 6'5",
it does not matter your star rating when you hit the field.
That's okay. I was mostly just throwing in there. If we don't know who Stetson Bennett is and we just look at the piece of paper with all the stats, the argument's there. It's like, oh, yeah. But we need the context, Blake. We need the context to tell the full story. Stetson Bennett played on back-to-back 2 of the best college football teams of all time.
Here's a clip for your ass. You ready?
Okay.
Well, I think we're TV 14, right? We could say ass.
Sure. Say as many bad words until we get told no. That's my usual.
I'm not doing that. I've already been told no. Let me give you a hot take and you can clip this.
Okay.
I can make the argument down the stretch in 2022, TCU excluded. Georgia's defense literally had lapses to where they needed Stetson Bennett and that offense to get going. Do you want to know another stat? Wasn't it? Oh, yeah, that's right. Stetson Bennett led them by throwing more to just Brock Bowers. And then you're going to say that their receiver core was not that good, that they were average, if not below average, okay? If anybody in the country had a below average receiving core, below average, and did what that man did, and if he were 6'4", 235 pounds, it would be a different argument. I
don't think it's fair to call that receiving core below average. He's still throwing to 5-star recruits. He's still throwing to 4-star recruits.
5-star recruits. The Smith kid is not a 5-star recruit.
What was A.D. Mitchell? Wasn't he a 4-star?
No, he was. I think he was. Well, if he was a 4-star, he was a lowly rated 4-star. And again, we're not talking about him having Justin Jefferson out there hitting the gritty when he's going into the end zone. Right foot, left foot, walking with the leaner head ass. We're not talking about that, Joe.
Yeah.
Like, I just can't, for the life of me, cannot fathom the hate that this man gets. You know what? I brought this argument up the other night. You ready? Okay. And then we got to get moving.
Okay.
What's the difference in Stetson Bennett having drunken disorderly and hiding from a cop behind a dumpster versus Tom Brady being absolutely obliterated after he won a Super Bowl, throwing the Lombardi from boat to boat? Newsflash.
He didn't get arrested.
But both of them are breaking the law. Both of them are drunk and disorderly in public. There's not a difference. You can't pick and choose what you think is right and wrong. He knocked on somebody's door. Whoopity fuckity do.
That's causing a commotion
I said a bad word.
At nighttime. That's obnoxious. That thinks you're Tom Brady being with his teammates during a celebration in a public event on a boat, being drunk and also as a 40-year-old man.
Patrick Mahomes was hugging fans at the parade, which, if you know what the word battery means, battery is any unwanted.
Stop! No, wait, are you insinuating that we can imply that he committed battery?
If another human being touches you and you don't want them to, you can file.
I don't think anyone's denying consent for a hug from Patrick Mahomes, though.
I'm with you there, but I'm just saying, like, we look at him getting a summons that's going to get dropped, and we're like, oh, he was drunk. So what?
No, come on. If some drunk 25-year-old banged on your door and was singing in the middle of the night, you'd get pissed, wouldn't you? Waking up your kids, you'd get pissed.
You get shot, but I live out in the boonies.
Okay, say you lived in a city, you'd still get pissed off.
It happened every week that we did. We lived in the city. I lived in New Orleans for 3 months or 2, whatever it was. And people would knock on my door and be like, hey, man, can I come use your pisser? And I'm like,
how mad did you get?
Not mad. I mean, because I was usually up.
Annoyed?
Probably
annoyed. But if Patrick Mahomes came up to you and hugged you, you're not going to be like,
I didn't want him to go to jail over it. Get out. And if you don't leave, I'm calling the cops.
But you would have called the cops, which would have meant that he would have gone to jail. So whatever.
All right, so we are live. Joe still stinks. Anywho, we do got a lot that we need to talk about here today. I thought you brought up a really good point, Joe, in reference to this topic. Some of the breakout stars or guys coming out of the portal.
Yeah.
I will say I couldn't just stop at 4. Okay, I had to put teams in there because I do think it's not fair to just single out one. Right now, some of them, which I know that I'll give you the first pick. One of them, I know that you'll probably pick with your first overall pick, but nevertheless, you're not wrong there. Okay, so we'll get into that, and then Brent Key, the former, I guess, right guard, if you will, from Georgia Tech, was the offensive coordinator at UCF. If you SEC fans remember, he replaced Mario Cristobal as the offensive line coach at Alabama. Was the run game coordinator for Georgia Tech under Jeff Collins. Now is the head coach at Georgia Tech. We will talk about him and what we expect. Joe, I will make a comparison here today that I think will knock your socks off like your SpongeBob SquarePants in reference to Brent Key, but nevertheless, we will talk about it. You ready to do this, man?
Oh, of course I'm ready. I'm excited.
Not ready than Notre Dame was to face Ohio State last year. Anyway, let's talk about our good friends over at betonline.ag. Use your mobile device today. Don't make
every free shot that you can take.
But isn't that what makes the show? I mean, if we can't, Joe, do you want me to be like this and say, we'll be back in 50 seconds to talk about our good friends over at
No, I approve of that. I don't approve of the weird implication that there's problems at Notre Dame because a kid got a C+ in a class.
Okay, hold on. Now you're bringing up private conversations. If you
want to
go
there, that's not a private conversation. I'm just saying, you tweeted about it. I
said interesting.
Oh, come on. We know what you're trying to say there. The kid asked out of his NLI.
I can't say interesting,
but we know that what you're referencing. And it's related to Notre Dame losing a kid.
Jesus, do you know my heart? Jesus, take the wheel.
I can read you. I think it's pretty easy to figure it out.
I was taking a shot. All right.
Yes, exactly.
How about our good friends over at BetOnline? Back in 50 seconds. BetOnline is the fastest and easiest way for you to wager on all of your favorite sports, contests, events with the first-to-market odds and lines. Find reviews for all the news for each league, including Major League Baseball, NFL, NBA, NHL, combat sports, college sports, esports, and even golf. BetOnline continues to be the top online resource for all of your sports information for live in-game betting, props, and futures. Head on over to BetOnline today and use your mobile device to join and make your first sports bet. Use our promo code BELIEVE50. That's BELIEVE50, BLEAV 50 to receive your 50% off welcome bonus on your first deposit. That's betonline.ag. Betonline.ag.
We're back.
Texas, no, you're not. All right. So in case you're just joining us, Joe and I are talking about today some of the biggest transfer portal guys and the guys that we think are going to make the biggest impact for their teams. Now, Joe, I will admit, like I just mentioned, two of my picks are teams, but very small portion of that unit and team. Okay, I think just a handful of guys that have to be massive for this team to excel. Okay, to get to that next level of where they want to be. But I will punt, or as they say in football terms, I will defer to the second half and give you the first overall pick. Sir, who would you like to take?
So I know you have less guys than I do, so I'm not going to take the one that I really like, and we were talking about him a little bit before at the beginning of the show.
You can take whatever you'd like. As T.I. once said, you can have whatever you like.
Okay. I'm going to take first because I don't think you're going to touch Sam Hartman. I'm going to wait to get to him. I want to talk about Dominic Lovett, the Missouri wide receiver that they pulled in the portal, who this is part of what I think stemmed our debate with how average, I don't want to say they were below average the Georgia receiving core was last year. You have a young quarterback stepping in, whether it's Brock Vandergriff, whether it's Carson Beck, you're going to have a new quarterback leading this offense. And I know that you can still lean on Brock Bowers, who's the best offensive weapon in the country returning next season. I think that, albeit they've pulled two receivers from the transfer portal, Dominic Lovett, in my eyes, is a very underrated player that I think deserves more focus and attention for the impact that he's going to provide next season for Georgia. He finished last year with 846 yards and 56 receptions with 3 touchdowns. And anyone who paid attention to Missouri, albeit like it's hard to pay attention to Missouri, they had a lot of quarterback issues. A lot of quarterback inconsistencies. I think that Lovett, throwing him into the mix with whatever big-armed quarterback is going to be throwing him the rock, he should be a 1,200-yard receiver. He is that good of a guy. He is that good of a recruit. He will have an impact instantly, I think, in my eyes, for this Georgia offense.
So the only thing that I'm going to slightly push back on,
okay,
I don't think that he's going to get over the 1,000-yard mark. Here's why. Yes, because, and when I was doing my research on this, if you go through Kirby's history, okay, with a young quarterback, I don't know how much they're going to throw the football. Look how many offensive linemen that they have returning. They have a very strong core of running backs coming in. Yeah. And I think that if they're going to have really explosive plays, it's not necessarily going to come from Lovett. I think it's going to come from Bowers, or as what I coined him as, Lad Mahonky. But nevertheless,
we need to make shirts for that.
We got to make shirts.
Has anyone made a Lad Mahonky shirt?
No. And you know what? I will make this well known. I will give the kid an NIL deal through the Ruffino and Joe show, and he can make all the profit. I don't want any money for it. I just want the shirt. Now, Cam Rogers, you got to make a big and tall section here. Okay, like 6'4" dudes don't wear slim trim. Okay. Not all of us are 5'7", okay? But nevertheless, I just don't know, because of the history that Kirby has at that specific position, okay? Like, look at George Pickens even before the injury, right? Mm-hmm. Like, he might be teetering that 1,000 yards. Yeah, he did some good things. But I don't think Dominic Lovett's better than George Pickens. But I will say this, though, and to combat that, 800 yards and 5 touchdowns in Georgia is the equivalent, in my opinion, of a guy having 1,200 yards and 8 touchdowns, if that makes sense, because it's just not created equally, right? Like, yards and touchdowns in some specific offenses aren't created equally. Like, as an example, at Alabama that Kirby was at, you would have a situation where you would have the Amari Cooper or the Calvin Ridley, okay? Mm-hmm. But what happened with everybody else? So if you have the Brock Bowers, it's going to be really and truthfully a committee, I feel like. Now, can he blossom? Can he do some good things? Possibly. But as where I sit right now, I just don't see him getting to that over 1,000-yard mark.
I can understand that, and this is going to be a hot take. I actually think for the beginning of the season with whoever the young quarterback is, if it's Beck or if it's Vandergriff, I do agree that the intention will probably be to run the football. But with an easy schedule for most of the season, I feel like once they get into a rhythm, you actually have, and again, this is where this is a hot take, I think you have more talented quarterbacks. And what I'm referring to here is just more arm talent, more guys that are going to be able to stretch the field a little bit more than what you've had in the past. And again, forget my bias against Stetson Bennett. Stetson was a good quarterback,
Well,
but
at least you admit it. That's the
he
first.
had. Everyone knows I'm biased. Like I'm not a liar. I'm not a liar on this show. I will admit when I have a bias against somebody, and I absolutely have that bias against Stetson Bennett.
All right, one word. What is it? What's the what?
I think he's a clown. I think
Okay,
he's like
on.
one of those typical guys that thinks that they're better than everybody else. I just don't.
Okay.
He gives off that persona, but he had physical limitations. What, you don't agree? You don't think that he gives off that persona that he thinks that is like he
sounds good. Beat me. Sounds good. Beat me. Sounds good. Beat him.
I'm not going to beat him, but
no,
I just don't like the way he carries himself. That's my issue.
Beat him on the field.
Okay.
You have a problem with it? Teams over scoring? Fine, stop me.
That's not my problem. It's the way that he carries himself is my issue with him.
Okay.
But
right,
my point is that there were physical limitations as a quarterback, arm talent for Stetson Bennett. I would argue that you have some very talented guys that are going to eventually take over that, again, can stretch the field a little bit more, can do a little bit more things that we haven't seen with quarterbacks that Kirby Smart has had. I think the closest they had was JT Daniels, and he was very mediocre. He was very inconsistent. So we might actually have somebody in the wings with Carson Beck, if that's the guy, that might be able to sling the rock and might be able to make some big plays as the season progresses.
All right, with my number one overall pick, Joe, you ready? I'm going to take Carson Steele at UCLA. All right, so listen, we all know, Joe, and I'm not going to spend long on here because I got longer-winded things to say about these other ones I have. I just think he's a good running back. I think that when you get him out in space, meaning Carson Steele, he's 5'11", 6 foot, 215 pounds. He can break tackles. Chip Kelly really wants to get the running game going. 289 carries last year, 1,556 yards rushing, 14 touchdowns, 29 receptions, 166 yards and a touchdown. You know what the one thing from Power 5 to Group of 5, the guys that have made a leap that we have not seen yet actually succeed is running back. Name a guy from a lower level program going to a place like UCLA or Georgia or LSU or Alabama that has made the leap. Now, there is one big one, and that was obviously Jamar Gibbs leaving Georgia Tech, had a really tough year, and then went to Alabama. We know how that blossomed, right? I just think that Carson Steele, due to the X's and O's and the scheme of things and the better offensive line that UCLA will have next year. And I think, Joe, another part of this too is you're going to have either a transfer quarterback in Shell or Shelley or the kid from Kent State or Dante Moore, and you're back in that same predicament. Chris H said, Blake, you should have taken Sam Hartman. No, I'm not going to do that. I'm not heartless.
You also don't like Sam Hartman in Notre Dame, so you weren't going to do that.
All right. Let me make this really well known.
Yep.
I actually like Sam Hartman.
Well, you don't like Notre Dame.
Correct. Well, it's not that I don't hate Notre Dame. I've never hated Notre Dame. I don't hate Notre Dame now. Here's what I'll say about Sam Hartman. I think he's a tad bit overrated. I think people say –
I don't disagree with that.
Okay, I think he's a tad bit overrated when it comes to, oh, look at this. He doesn't do anything special. He doesn't have one quality about him that's special. Okay. So I will digress because I want to get to some of these other guys and teams.
Yeah, we're gonna get to Sam Hartman in a second, but I wrote down Carson Steele. I love Carson Steele. His production, 1,500 rushing yards and 14 touchdowns. The guy plays like a battering ram. I think you mentioned he plays really well in space, but what is really fun about Carson Steele is just the reckless abandonment that he plays with. He's got the long flowing hair, which is funny and goofy to see on a running back. But you kind of couple that with that mentality as it's really fun to watch him play football. I said this in the pre-show when we were doing our prep here. I think that he is a better running back coming into this UCLA offense than Zach Charbonnet was when he transferred from Michigan and came in. I think that Charbonnet benefited tremendously from a scheme that sets up running backs with wide open rushing lanes. And Charbonnet is like a Mack truck trying to redirect. The guy does not redirect well. I think that Carson Steele does, and you're putting him into an offense that creates open space. Like, this might be a crazy stat line by the end of the year. I don't know what that stat line is going to be. I don't know how you improve from 1,500 rushing yards, but you could see something dumb like 1,700 rushing yards. He could be a top 5 rusher by the end of the season. I think that this one's an absolute.
I don't think he gets that much because here's what I heard Chip Kelly talk about when he talked about Carson Steele. Remember that 29? Because I did some. So let me just tell you something candidly. Okay, LSU, as an example, and everybody knows that I cover them at this point as well. I was texting a lot of offensive coaches at LSU when Carson Steele hit the portal, and LSU's got a loaded running back room. You know what each coach I talked to? I talked to one at Florida. I talked to a couple, obviously some at LSU, and I talked to a guy at Texas A&M that I've known probably 25 years that's a coach there. You know what they said that they love about Carson Steele the most? 29 receptions, 166 yards, 5.7 yards per catch, and a TD, meaning, look, once he catches it, he's north and south. He's not pitter-pattering. He's north and south. So that's interesting that so many coaches in the SEC and coaches that I talked to at least said that they love that more than the 1,500 yards is that he can catch the football. All right, Joe, who's your number 2 overall pick?
All right, we'll just get it out of the way. Sam Hartman is who I'm going to go with the second pick here for high-impact transfer portal players. This one's obvious, and I know everyone's like, the Notre Dame bias, Joe picked Sam Hartman. Blah, blah, blah. I kind of have to. Their quarterback situation last year was abysmal. It was terrible. Drew Pine stinks. Drew Pine was so annoyingly frustrating to watch on a week-to-week basis.
Right.
And then he hops in the portal. He says bye-bye, and then they put Tyler Buckner in for the bowl game. And that was even more frustrating, which I didn't even know that we could get that far. Sam Hartman, as you said, physically, is not a gifted quarterback that is got the massive arm or the crazy athleticism. But what you get with him is experience and just being a really good, consistent college quarterback. He has 12,000, almost 13,000 career passing yards under his belt, 110 touchdowns. I'm a little concerned with the accuracy because his career completion percentage is at 50.
Am I rubbing off on you with this accuracy?
You might be. 59% completion percentage, which isn't great, but you also have to consider the fact it's not good, but he's at Wake Forest. Like, A.T. Perry is the best receiver he had, and he's a really good receiver, and then it's nobody. And a very mediocre offensive line and no running backs. He was in a tough spot. It was difficult to succeed at Wake Forest. How many other guys do we know that have had good careers at Wake Forest that played quarterback? Nobody. So for him to do what he did in the ACC on a notoriously terrible football program, I think shows that he's going to step into a situation at Notre Dame that desperately needed a quarterback, that really needs a spark now that they've got a no-name offensive coordinator. I think that Sam Hartman is going to be one of the better quarterbacks in college football this upcoming year.
I'm not going to say anything about Sam Hartman because I think at this point, if I talk Notre Dame, it gets overblown like I'm being biased. But I do think he's a tad overrated. Joe, in the last show, I talked about so much how accuracy and that accuracy number is massive to me. Okay, I agree with you. Now, I also agree with you to the extent of, look, like they were building, they were trying to build something there. And I give him less of a, please don't go down this tangent. I give him more of a pass. I give him more of a pass than I do, let's just say, an Anthony Richardson, because the guys that Richardson had around him were much better and more talented than what you saw Sam Hartman have. Now, the thing that worries me more than the accuracy is, Joe, when it came to crunch time, go look at those numbers. They weren't great. All right. With my number 2 overall pick, and then I got 2 teams I want to talk about.
Okay.
With my number 2 overall pick, I'm going Jordan Birch, who was at South Carolina and now is at the University of Oregon. Joe, this is a progression that we've seen from him, right? Because when I look at – it's really easy to look at Jordan Birch and say, well, you know what? As a freshman, he played 7 games. He only had 9 solo tackles. He didn't have any sacks. His sophomore year, he only had a sack, and this year he only had 3.5 sacks. Well, truth be told, though, he had 7.5 tackles for loss, and that number's only gotten better. He did have a pick 6 as a sophomore. He went 60-plus yards and scored a touchdown. You can just tell that he's an athletic freak. Joe, I think that now that he has a true defensive-minded coach in Dan Lanning, I think Dan Lanning's going to let him loose. I think that he's going to show up to the party at college, and the song that's going to be playing is "I'm loose as a goose, don't get me started." And then the pun is so great because you're the Ducks. I think that Jordan Birch is when you talk about one of those guys that everybody knows is an athletic freak that can get after the passer, barring injury. I think Dan Lanning gets the most out of him. We've seen the progression, 4 guys at Oregon and at Georgia under him. You know who, if we want to be truthful, who has a lot of the same numbers as he did? Nolan Smith. So when you look at Nolan Smith and you're like, oh my God, and you're gushing over him, Nolan Smith didn't start off great. I like Jordan Birch, and I think that they could do something with him. And when he's more of in a weaker conference, if he can get to 8 sacks, he's going to be a top 5 pick. Because he's going to test ridiculously. He's going to be 6'6". He's going to be 280 pounds. He's going to run a 4.5, and everybody's going to be like, oh my God, look at Jordan Birch run. And then off to the history. I think he's a staple in that Oregon defense.
I think that the big takeaway here is the fact that of where he's going. Like that's what's really important to me. And it's kind of like the Carson Steele pick where you're throwing him into an offense that is going to set him up for even more success because he does well in space. And I think with Birch, who we've known to be this really athletic kid and that hasn't necessarily always lived up to those expectations.
Right.
That's exciting to me, going to a creative-minded, defensive-minded head coach in Dan Lanning. We saw the results that they produced last year, and that grouping is it was an okay defensive grouping. Like, it was a good defense. Justin Flo didn't play as good as we're used to seeing. Noah Sewell didn't play as good as I think we had hoped. I really do like this pick. I think that Birch is another one of those sleepers that hopped in the portal, was not effectively used in his time at South Carolina, as you mentioned.
At all.
Which is a kind of a nod to a guy that I called overrated a couple weeks ago, but I digress. I like that Birch is going to be playing for the Oregon Ducks, dude. That big thing here too, the pulls that they had in the portal separate from him, there are so many athletes that are going to be running all over the field for Oregon that it is going to be impossible to keep up with all those guys on a snap-to-snap basis.
All right, who's your number 3 overall pick?
Yeah, I had Dorian Singer, who's the Arizona wide receiver, who last season had 1,100 yards and 6 touchdowns, and we injected Jordan Addison into the USC wide receiver group, and his production wasn't the same as it was at Pitt because he was the only guy. He won the Blitikoff because he was the only guy that Kenny Pickett was throwing the ball to in a group of nobodies. But he fit perfectly in the mix of players with him and Mario Williams with an elite quarterback. And Caleb Williams knows how to get the football around. I think that you're not taking any step back by adding Singer into the mix. I think that he is There's a reason why he was hyped up to be one of the best receivers in college football last year. And I don't think he got enough recognition for being how good of a player he was, because he was playing on a team that ran like the read option mostly as their offensive approach. And that Arizona team was mediocre. It wasn't bad, but it was mediocre. So I think Singer jumping into an offense that loves to air the football out, loves these athletic types of receivers, I think is going to have a really big season.
I got to be honest, I don't know anything really about him. So if I'm going to sit here and talk to you about him, I just don't know enough about him. Arizona, I mean, Arizona.
He played in the Pac-12 though. He was playing in the Pac-12,
Okay,
so he's going up against
the weakest conference in the country.
It's not that. Well, this is a separate argument.
He had a Heisman Trophy quarter. He was at UCLA last year. I mean, USC last year.
Who? Wait, you're saying that Caleb Williams was at you?
I'm saying the Singer kid. He was at USC last year.
He was at U of A, and now he's transferring to USC.
Oh, he's transferring to USC.
Yes.
Okay, then I take back what I said. I thought he was going to Arizona. I'm
what
an idiot.
It's the other way around. He was at Arizona. He's coming to USC, and now he is.
Well, hey, I mean, hell, Caleb Williams, and you know what's even, hell, him, Caleb Williams, and his painted fingernails can't throw in the football. Hey, can we got to say something? We have not on this show yet mentioned the former Heisman Trophy winning quarterback and his nails in quite some time. I'm honestly, I'm pretty happy for myself
that you've made it this far.
That I've made it this far.
He's in the news every week. So to kind of peel back the curtain a little bit here, Blake, whenever I'm coming up with topics, I have a couple different places that I go to for pulling news articles. And a lot of times these topic-based things that we end up talking about here, I didn't pull this from an article, but every week there's a different Caleb Williams quote talking about what he's going to do next season and his thoughts on, I want to go play for the Dolphins. And his other one is that I want to be the first overall pick. There was another one today. I forget what it was, but the offseason just loves talking to Caleb Williams. I feel like they're just hoping that he says something obnoxious. Talk about a guy, by the way, that I don't like.
I know. I mean, if you don't like Stetson Bennett, then what do you think about Caleb Williams?
Stetson Bennett, Caleb Williams.
No doubt.
I really don't like the way that
There's nobody on planet Earth that loves Caleb Williams more than Caleb Williams.
He is so USC. He is so goddamn LA too. It's a perfect fit. Him being in Oklahoma didn't make any sense to me. Like him being in Oklahoma was that's a little too humble in my opinion. Cause actually it doesn't make sense the same with Baker, but him going to USC, just everybody that's been here, that's been a quarterback, they're so full of themselves. I don't know if he's going to pan out.
I want Matt Leinart on the show. Don't be that guy.
I don't know if I can get through an interview with Matt Leinart.
That's fine. All right.
I'm going to have to mute myself for that.
I'm just excited that I went 20 plus episodes without talking about Caleb Williams and his stupid nails. That's what I'm happy about myself.
And considering he liked one of your tweets too.
Yeah. I mean, and Lindell White, came after me and Lindell lost.
Lindell also tried to come after me.
Who is he not coming after? I mean, my man, let's smoke.
He's the nicest guy though in person.
Greatest dude ever.
Funniest thing. He's a different person on Twitter.
But God bless it. Don't say anything bad about USC.
Yeah.
All right. So Joe, for my third and final pick, I'll give you another one if you have one. I got two teams so let me say this. I just don't think it's fair for these two teams and some of the guys that they brought in not to mention at least two of them, at minimum two of them.
Mm-hmm.
Buddy, I got to tell you something. The more and more I look at Florida State, the more and more I start asking myself this question. Can they afford to lose to LSU in the opener? Yes. But if they win, which I don't think that they will because now that things are rolling at LSU, but if they do, man, Jaheim Bell going from South Carolina to Florida State, Braden Fisk, who had offers from Alabama, from LSU.
He was supposed to go to Notre Dame. That was where everyone thought.
Well, I could look. I'm just going to be candid and don't because this is not me guessing. This is not just sources. This is firsthand information. Notre Dame rubbed him the wrong way. Okay, now take it for what it's worth. I mean, LSU was also recruiting him at a high level. Joe, he could be some people believe he's going to be a second to third round pick. And when you get that in the interior from what he did, I think he had the most pressures in NCAA football last season. That's another guy. Then not only did they do something in the middle, they go on the outside and get Ventrell Cypress, one of the better corners in the transfer portal. They had him as the number 4 overall guy in the portal. That's one core group of guys. Then I flip over, and you're going to hate this again, but you took Notre Dame. I don't think that you can sit in here and actively talk about portal without going to LSU, okay? Denver Harris and Zy Alexander are 2 corners. Now, Joe, I'm going to give you an interesting stat here. You know how I love to just throw in stats when it benefits me, and then when it doesn't benefit me, I hate every single one of them. LSU was 71st in the country on third down. If they would only have converted on defensively, a third of those third downs that they let up, they would have been the number 12 defense in the country. It was the most ad-lib defense that you ever could have seen. If you don't lose to A&M, you don't lose to Florida State if you don't give up those third downs. I think the reason that they did that was that they have massively upgraded at DB. And I think you could throw Omar Spates from Oregon State, who was the number 1 guy in run defenses and solo tackles. They've gotten better defensively. Those 2 teams, I don't remember when you talk about 2 rising teams that are in today's society. I hate the word blue blood, but I'll just throw it out there. Today's society, 2 teams are trying to get back to the promised land. LSU more recently, obviously, than Florida State. I don't remember a more anticipated first game of the college football season more than Florida State and LSU. We've had some potential ones, right? Like we've had some potentials, but I just don't think when you had these type of NFL pieces to these 2 teams that you can't just look and be like, man, that's going to be one hell of a heavyweight fight.
This game, and I think I've already said this on this show, is going to impact the outlook of the entire season.
College football season.
The winner, I think, is going to set. We're going to be talking about the winner for the entire year. It's going to be one of those things.
Until Florida State plays Clemson, until LSU plays Bama.
Yes,
right.
Exactly.
We will talk about it from September to November the 1st.
I love that LSU stole Denver Harris, and I think that a few of these other pickups they had are very significant. LSU, as I've said on the show, is a team that's not really losing a whole lot. Like, who's the most impactful guy that you lost to the NFL draft? Jaquelin Roy? Like,
I don't think that Jaquelin Roy was honest. I'm not going to go there.
I don't think he's very good. I'm being completely honest. I don't think he's very good. I had a very low grade on him.
Okay, well, there you go.
So, but that's my point, is that you guys aren't losing anyone.
I think BJ Ojulari, okay?
Yes, BJ.
It's a massive loss. And I also think that Micah Baskerville is a massive loss. Joe, there was no linebacker in the country that had more passes batted down and more forced incompletions in the country more than Micah Baskerville. Yeah. So if LSU's got to get better in coverage. They just do. Because of those third downs that made them 71st in the country, do you want to know that an alarming 90% of them came through the air? 90%. You know where the other 10% came from? This is not a made-up stat. Here's something crazy for your ass. The 10% literally came against Texas A&M. That is just a like. And LSU fans remember this when you start Jackson Dart on third down. When you stopped KJ Jefferson, or I mean not KJ Jefferson, who was the kid? Malik Hornsby on third down multiple times. My point is here, not just LSU though, because I don't want this to get biased. When you look at Florida State too, Joe, they are my favorites right now to win the ACC. I think Florida State finally breaks through. And I will give Mike Norvell, and I will apologize openly on this show. And I thought that they were going to be a good team last year. Brother, Jared Verse, you have a scenario where you have Jared Verse and Braden Fisk as one is a 5 and one is a 3 technique. Good luck.
Nuts.
It's insane, man. And I just don't know if Clemson has enough in the interior on both lines of scrimmage to be able to compete with Braden Fisk and Jared Verse. I just don't think that they have that.
They don't. They have a good enough roster to run through the ACC schedule and then lose to Florida State. But as much credit as I'm giving to LSU right now, Blake, I got to be completely honest, and your audience is going to hate me for this. I can't even compare the LSU transfer portal haul and the Florida State one. I think that there is a gap because Florida State's transfer portal haul is heads, leagues above the second best team to transfer portal class.
Where?
What do you mean? Just in my opinion, the guys that they pulled, Central Cyprus, who they got. We talked about Braden Fisk.
All right, let me ask you this question: would you consider Denver Harris and Central Cyprus a wash?
I think that Central Cyprus doesn't get enough credit for how good of a player he is. Denver Harris is younger, though. That's the difference. That I guess you could consider that a wash because one's a little more proven.
Bell versus Omar Spates. Would you give that a wash?
I would give that to Jaheim Bell.
Okay, well, you do have a guy in the Pac-12 that was the best in coverage in Pro Football Focus stated and the best run stuffer. So, again, I'm not trying to defend LSU here. What I'm just trying to say is, Joe, I literally think can you name me a better opening season game than this one?
There isn't.
Well, and not just now. I'm talking about can you go back 10 years and name for me a better opening game than this one that we've seen in the last 10 years? Because I literally can't think of one.
No, and that's, again, my main point why I'm really high on Florida State. And I'm probably going to talk about Florida State ad nauseum the entire offseason that
I don't blame you. I don't blame you.
Because they're returning so much talent. And then, again, I think that they had far and away the most talented transfer portal haul. I know that you disagree with me a little bit on that, but some of these guys that they pulled, man, were all these really good players, the best players on their rosters that they just yanked and they pulled in the portal that are now going to be key important pieces. The big thing that I'm scared about for any offensive line is having to match up with what you talked about, Braden Fisk versus Jared Verse. Both those guys.
Both guys that got there through the portal.
Having to deal with both of them is going to be a nightmare for any offensive line.
Just remember this name, Aaron Anderson. Just remember it.
Okay.
What's the name?
Aaron Anderson.
Okay. All right. Speaking of the ACC, Joe, let's do this because we only have a shorter amount of time to get to this. Let's transition over to Brent Key since we're already in the ACC. But before we do that, you want to tell our buddies and our friends about our good friends over at betonline.ag?
Yes. It's March Madness going on right now. And because of March Madness, if you're like me and your bracket's going to get busted in the first 5 minutes, you can go back and make your money by placing some bets on BetOnline. There's this interesting strategy that I'm actually going to try this year, Blake. I'm going to go put bets on every single underdog. I'm going to put $1 on every single underdog. I'm going to see how many of those bets hit. And if I go in the positive, if you want to try that strategy, might be a fun one. You can do it at betonline.ag, which has all of the odds for all of the March Madness games, as well as any other sport if you're interested in betting on them. BetOnline.ag, use promo code BELIEVE50. BetOnline, where the game starts.
All right, so Brent Key, how do I want to introduce him? Okay, so look, Brent Key, Georgia Tech obviously fired their head coach. They promoted Brent Key from within. Now, when Brent Key went 4-4 as the Texas head coach, as the interim head coach, I don't think at Georgia Tech with that roster that they had is honestly that bad. I thought that they did some good things. First half, they gave Georgia everything that they wanted, but again, everybody's trying to compare themselves to Georgia. Now, Brent Key, the new head coach at Georgia Tech, was obviously his offensive line guy. He played offensive line at Georgia Tech. Some SEC fans remember he replaced Mario Cristobal at Alabama in 2019 and was there until he left to go home. And went back to Georgia Tech as the run game coordinator and offensive line coach and the assistant head coach at Georgia Tech. Here's my hot take of the day. I truly believe this in my heart of hearts. If they wanted to, Georgia Tech could be the Notre Dame of the South. I fully believe that. And to some extent, due to the academic requirements of both programs, Georgia is a more rich state when it comes to in-state talent that they're not attacking. They're getting poached by everybody.
Notre Dame has notoriously poached some elite talent like Kyle Hamilton from the private schools in the area. So 100% correct.
It's not just Notre Dame. Florida, Alabama, obviously Georgia gets the ones that they handpick. Clemson goes in there. This is really bad. Joe, here's why I'm not in on Brent Key. You ready? This is what I told you earlier in the show. You want to know why? The number one reason why I'm out on Brent Key right now?
Why?
My man went in the portal and got Haynes King. Probably the thrower of the football and quarterback history. Bro, he's like this.
Yeah, the ball's like up here when he's throwing. You can't do that.
What makes you think that you can go into the portal and get Haynes King? Now, can they work on King's mechanics? Because look, I will tell you a little something now about Haynes King. He's got a little athleticism to him.
He's a 4.3 athlete. That's rumored that he's a 4.3 guy.
If he runs a 4.3, then my Gaguna is hitting the floor. He's not running no 4.3.
He's faster than you think. I was stunned by that too.
I've literally seen Harold Perkins track him down in open space and body slam him. Spare me that
maybe he's a slow. Maybe that means Harold Perkins is a 4.2. I'm just kidding. But
yeah, okay.
He's fast, nonetheless.
You were talking about Jaquaylin Roy earlier. Yeah. I've literally seen Jaquaylin Roy run him down. Okay, so let's not.
He's fast though. Maybe he's 4.4, 4.5.
He's not faster than Anthony Richardson.
He's much smaller though.
He is not faster than Anthony Richardson.
He's a 4.4 athlete.
Anthony Richardson.
But this is semantics. Semantics. He's a good athlete.
If they can work on that kid's mechanics, maybe you got something. But man,
he feels like a little kid playing t-ball. By the way, that was like what I was trying to think of. Like we're like a 5-year-old's playing t-ball, and they like bring the ball up really high, and they like awkwardly kind of shove it. It's just a weird.
Dude, no they're 67th and 62nd in the country in recruiting. I mean, when you have that kind of a state that's that rich in talent, what are you doing?
There's some optimism here with him.
I have zero.
Right. So they go 4-4. He goes 4-4 as the interim. He has some upsets in this period of time. And for some reason, Georgia Tech fans are so high on Brent Key. So I posted on my channel a reaction video, and I got way more views on it than I should have because I got killed in the comments. It got way too many comments with all these losers complaining that I was saying that Brent Key was a terrible, lazy hire. 4-4 is fine. 4-4 is great. It's easy to rally around a guy who is a former player of the program when you got rid of your head coach. But he is not the long-term solution. And we saw that in recruiting. I know that it's his first year recruiting, but no, I think that this is one of the worst hires of the cycle. I think it's a terrible, terrible hire. And I looked at what their schedule is next season. I'd be shocked if they win 4 games. Shocked if they win 4 games.
Well, and he did win 4 games as an interim.
A lot of the games that he did win were great timing for some of those wins. And again, I give him credit. He had some upsets, but I don't think that is sustainable.
I agree with that. Look, I agree with that. I'm not going to say it's lazy, but you had Willie Fritz. Okay, the two.
That's who they should have hired.
Well, they should have gone. They should have gone to the ends of the earth and hired Willie Fritz. Now, I hate it. It bothers me to say that as a Louisiana homegrown guy because Tulane's right here. But buddy, like you're coming like I look at programs sometimes, and this is a massive pet peeve of mine. Joe, I know for an outright fact when it comes to hiring head coaches, like hiring dudes, I would find a way to hire Willie Fritz before I promoted Brent Key. Okay. I get that he's one of your guys, but you know what historically doesn't work? Hiring your guy. Okay. It just doesn't work. Joe, the outside of Dabo and outside of Orgeron, who succeeded but yet failed, name coaches that have been promoted from within and that's had massive amounts of success. It just Scott Frost was Nebraska's guy, and how did that work out? It didn't work out at all.
Right.
So I just don't see it right now. I just can't. I can't see the forest through the trees. And if I could, I would say, well, the only way that he was doing that is because he was recruiting at a higher level. When are these programs going to get in a situation where you just like, does Georgia Tech not have money? Like, that's not true. They do have money.
I just think they don't care. Like that's where I'm at. It's an institution where I don't think that they care if they're competitive, because when was the last time that they were competitive? They're not seeking out.
The last time they were competitive was when they had Calvin Johnson. And I mean, that was the last time that they were utterly competitive. And you know what? Before then, it was in the movie Rudy.
Jeez. And that's bad. That's so bad. And honestly, if I'm Willie Fritz, I'm waiting for a better offer, man. I'm waiting for a much better offer than Georgia Tech, because they don't care.
Giant, though. Think about.
But it is, but it isn't, because they're not going to put in the foundation and the support.
I don't disagree.
Colorado's a sleeping giant. That Deion took that job, and Deion was rumored for the Georgia Tech job, and everyone was so sure that the Georgia Tech fans were actually so sure that Deion was going to take the job, because I
actually kind of thought he was going to take it too. The way that he was hinting about. He instantly posted something on Instagram, like he posted a picture of some peaches, like Georgia peach, and I'm like, that some gun's going to Georgia. You know,
I think that Colorado is a team that's more set up for success than him, and then they've already shown a quick turnaround and a willingness to put in as much support as possible. But no, this Brent Key hire, man, the one that I said from the jump is just it was so unbelievably lazy, and that's what the lazy move to do is when. It's harder to get mad at a guy who's one of your program. You know, he gets a longer leash. He's going to get a longer leash than somebody from the outside. It's just the reality of it. And it's a safe move.
I agree with that. But you know what? Again, like I would have called Willie Fritz. You know what else I would have called? I would have called Dan Mullen. I would have made these elite coaches tell me no. Like
they didn't even take the time to do that.
No, they didn't.
They hired him right off the bat.
The best interview that they had was Willie Fritz. It's the best interview that they had. And you're just not going to have success when you can't recruit. Recruiting is the lifeblood that fuels the dreams of champions. And if you don't fuel that lifeblood, then you're not going to be worth a damn. And I would, you know what, Joe, I would have been like, you know what? Okay, well, he had a really crappy high school class, but he killed it in the portal. He didn't even do that. He went and got Haynes King as his primary dude.
And it's not hard. I'm making this sound easier said than done. I would argue that it's feasible to pick apart the portal as an academic school and go and pull the best kids from the Ivy Leagues and from other academic institutions at the FCS level, and then also across the country, guys from Stanford, guys from UCLA, guys from those types of schools. It's not difficult. It's a really good school because those kids value education.
How many guys did Notre Dame have leave?
Plenty that they could have pulled.
Every one of them.
Yeah.
I would have offered every one of them. How many guys did Stanford have? I would have offered every one of them.
A ton.
Right?
A ton.
So I would have offered every one of them. They make your team better. But what do I know? All right.
Good show.
Other than your horrible Stetson Bennett takes.
I will still stand by that.
Okay. Well,
till the end of time.
Stand by these nuts. Pause.
Not the note I thought we were going to end on.
Me either. I just kind of got aggravated with myself for saying that. All right. We'll see y'all Wednesday, correct?
Wednesday. We'll be back.
Right. See y'all then. Peace.